welcome to this week's edition of the Maine Challenge. Here at the Maine Challenge, we have said we have got to start doing things differently. That we have got to sort of reimagine, well, pretty much everything. That if we are going to go from fear to hope and from hatred to our hearts, we need to do things very differently. And one way we here at Maine Challenge can help with that is to lift up the stories and the people and the projects that are already doing exactly that. And one of those ideas is guaranteed basic income or universal basic income. You know, where we do the one thing that actually we know takes care of poverty, which is money. And guaranteed basic income is to actually make sure that we send money, that people get money every month, low income folks, unrestricted, to help them meet their basic needs. Now, this is an idea that was popularized by Andrew Yang in the Democratic primary, and then we all sort of got to experience it with the stimulus payments during the pandemic. You know, and when those happened, everyone sort of breathed a sigh of relief. The economy started to turn along. There were lots and lots of positive results. Well, this week, we get to talk to two amazing women who started a program on guaranteed basic income in 2017, many years ago, before people were really talking about it on the national stage. And those people are Aisha Nyandoro from Jackson, Mississippi, and Carol Wishcamper from right here in Freeport, Maine. And then in Sounds Off, I talk about some other ideas that we have about doing things differently. Thanks for joining us, and enjoy.
To have no strings felt like a blessing.
I am so grateful and honored to have with us two very special guests. Carol Wishcamper, who is from Freeport, Maine. She is an organizational development consultant helping boards and people be empowered, and she has done this for many organizations across Maine and the country. She has served on many boards herself, including the State Board of Education, and is the chair of the Sewell Foundation, among many, many others. And has been for so long empowering people and organizations, and has been a friend to everyone in Maine for so long. And Carol, we are grateful to have you with us. So thank you.
Thank you, Betsy. It's an honor.
And then Aisha Nyandoro, who I am so thrilled to have, who is from Jackson, Mississippi. And she is the founder and CEO of Springboard to Opportunities. She is on a mission to support and help families be lifted out of poverty. It has been a lifelong mission. She comes from a long line of people who have been doing this, as well as I understand from your TED Talk, Aisha. And she has vast and varied experiences. She has a PhD in community psychology. She has a long list of articles and appearances and honors. And mostly it's important to know that we are speaking today with two trailblazers in the national conversation about racial and economic inequity and how we eradicate it. So again, thank you for being with us, and thank you for who you are and the work that you do. It's great to have
having us.
Yeah. So what I want to talk about with you today is your a specific project, and you have both been part of the first guaranteed basic income program for single Black mothers in the country, the Magnolia Mothers Trust. And so that's a lot of mouthful, but it is like one of the first times that we have seen a program that has gone on for years now, several years, that is actually giving cash to people in poverty, because guess what? The way to stop not be poor is to have more money. So it doesn't seem like it's that hard, a difficult thing. But Carol, I want to start with you. And it's a two-part question. So the first part is, how did you get interested in the whole idea of a guaranteed basic income? That's the first part. And the second is how did you come to partner with Aisha and the Magnolia Mothers Trust?
Let me take the second part of the question first,
Sure.
Because it was through Aisha that I got in contact with the notion of a basic income. And that happened, you know, this is a story of emergence. And when we teamed up, neither one of us had that in mind. Mm-hmm. So the improbable question is, how did Carol Wishcamper and Aisha Nyandoro from Maine and from Mississippi meet up? And the linkage is Joe Wishcamper, my husband, who is an affordable housing developer and has projects all over the country, and especially in Mississippi. He has several properties there. And round about, maybe it was 2010 or 11, he was in the process of acquiring a very large 400 unit family housing project. And it turned out to be the scourge of Jackson. It was a dangerous place to live. It was so dangerous that when he put the property under a purchase and sale agreement, he had to hire private security to come and really try to manage what was there because the Jackson police wouldn't come. It was too dangerous. So we had some funds, and immediately Joe tried to figure out how to really stabilize the project. And he brought in a very conventional social service organization in Jackson. And a year and a half or two passed, nothing happened. He then sent me down as the organizational development person to sort of look into what was happening. My finding was, when I came back, was to say to him, your management company really needs to square up. You can't bring anybody else in until you do your own inner work in terms of the property management and resident services. And at that point, I was really intrigued by what was happening in Harlem, the Harlem Children's Zone, where they basically blocked off 30 square blocks of East Harlem and they layered in services. And that was the model that was in my head for this community and an adjacent housing property that Joe also owned. So Joe, on one of his trips, went and talked to the Mississippi Women's Fund. Aisha was on the board. After his presentation, she went up and said to him, you need me. And we did. And so I then went down, interviewed Aisha in a hotel lobby for about 40 minutes. She said yes, I said yes. And then I'm going to hand it over to her because it was really her brilliance that moved us along. But I also want to give a shout out to Betsy Beeman, a sister Mainer, who consulted with us for the first 6 months in trying to figure out the structure, put together the nonprofit entity, bring in the board. And then Aisha became our first executive director, and within weeks had programs happening, and I'll let her pick up the story.
No, yeah, thank you for that. So that really, Betsy, is the emergent story of Springboard to Opportunities. And so Springboard has operated since 2013, providing programs and services for families that live in federally subsidized affordable housing. Our majority of our footprint is in Mississippi, but we also have a small footprint in Alabama and Maryland as well. And we pride ourselves on being radically resident driven, really taking a holistic approach to the programs and services that we offer to families that live within the communities that we serve. And when we say radically resident driven, that means everything that we provide, from after school programs to workforce development programs, food pantries, diaper banks, healthcare clinics on site in a couple of those places. And also how we pivoted as an organization since COVID to really providing a lot of the direct support that families need. So whether or not that's PPE or hotspots, laptops, access to vaccines, information about vaccines, we really are an organization that prides ourselves on our ability to not stay within the status quo of what resident services should look like, but really recognizing that if individuals have safe, affordable housing, which they do have by the virtue of living in affordable housing, all the other programs and supports that we provide really should be aligned to what it is that they need to be successful in life, school, and work. So with that understanding of being a radically resident organization and really helping to lean into what it is that families need to be successful, in 2017, we had been doing this work for a few years now with, a little success. We were excited about the programs and services that we were providing, but we also were challenged because we were not moving the needle on poverty. And what that means specifically for us is that we were not seeing a successful matriculation out of the affordable housing communities. And the only reason that matters, because it's not as if that is a goal of Springboard, but the reason that matters is because it's something that our families indicated matters to them. A lot of our families, they have dreams of home ownership, they have dreams of market rate living. And so we really did become concerned that, okay, we were missing something. And so since we are an organization that prides ourselves on having feedback loops and having regular conversations with our families, whenever we do have questions, we go directly to our families and ask them, what is it that we're missing? And in this regard, it was just that it was a very simple, it wasn't the usual going out with all of these questions that we typically do. It was really, we're missing something and we don't know what it is. And we talked about 100 families in that instance. And at the end of the day, the common denominator of what families were missing was cash. Our families did not have the financial resources to take care of what we consider some of the inconsequential little things, such as, a uniform for your daughter to participate in a cheerleading squad, or the bigger things, getting your car fixed so that you can continue to go to work and really provide the living wage that your family needs to be successful. And so I'm a researcher by trade. In my bio, you talked about I went to Michigan State and all those things. So I really started going down this rabbit hole of, and me and Carol, I really spent about a year down a rabbit hole of how do you go about giving people money? If our families are telling us that they need money, how do we go about doing that? And this is in 2017. So the ideal of giving cash without restrictions was not something that was in the mainstream conversation. And giving cash without restrictions to Black individuals, to Black mothers in poverty definitely was not in the conversation. But in our research, we learned about guaranteed income, which has a long history within this country as it relates to Black liberation movements, first with the Black Panthers, then with the National Welfare rights organization. Dr. King called for a guaranteed income. And it really is just a way that you go about providing financial resources to those within a community who have been most harmed by policies or systems within that community. And so we heard about guaranteed income and we said, this is intriguing. Shall we try it? And that's where the Magnolia Mothers Trust came from. And, and I talk about the Magnolia Mothers Trust a lot and I tell the origin story of the work, but I really think we do not, and I know we don't give enough conversation as to how this work would not have ever happened if Joe and Carol and our board did not believe in radical possibilities and have a radical imagination about what could be beyond the status quo. Because in 2017, when we started this work, it really was us testing an idea. We did not have a blueprint. We did not know whether or not it would work. It was everyone taking a gamble on this abundant possibility that, quite frankly, we have been very fortunate panned out. But had it not been for them with the initial seed funding, with the initial belief in the leadership and what was possible, we would still just be talking about how do you go about supporting families, and not just our families. We would still be talking about that on a national level, because so much of what we started in 2017 is now a national model for how you go about disrupting the cycle of poverty, how you stop doing the status quo, and how you go about giving families the financial resources that they need without punitive aspects, and trusted that it is that they know what they need for themselves and their families to be successful.
Well, so, I mean, it's so awesome. And it goes against so many stereotypes and the sort of national chatter that has happened for decades, and certainly enhanced by Ronald Reagan and many others about the stories. And I think you've talked about the danger of a single story, which I love that concept of, we have one story about who a poor Black mother is and what her attributes are and what happens. And I think to take away this, I think for most people, the idea of giving cash without strings attached is like all that story, and it is a story, it's not reality, just comes flooding in, and people like say, what? So Aisha, tell us a little bit, just start with how it works. So just tell us exactly how it works.
Yeah, so the Magnolia Mothers Trust provides $1,000 a month for 12 months to mothers, Black mothers specifically, that live in federally subsidized affordable housing in Jackson, Mississippi. We also take a 2-generation approach because we seed 529 accounts for every child of a Magnolia Mothers kid with $1,000, because we are investing in not only their mom's future, but we're investing in the future of the kids as well. We also believe in the power of social capital. Magnolia Mothers Trust would not exist without social capital when we were doing our initial fundraising. So we definitely believe in the power of social capital, where we have monthly opportunities for the moms to gather via Zoom now because of COVID, to gather in communities to share, learn, whatever it is that they need for themselves. So
Aisha, how did you pick them?
We do a lottery process. Thank you. I never think about the details of how. I know, right?
Well, it's just right. So you put names in a hat and you pick.
The first year we did that. We don't do that anymore. Our evaluator now has a whole software that they put the names in, and the algorithm picks the names. But the first year, it really was, we put names in a box.
That alone smashes all the stereotypes, right? You have to have, they have to agree to a million things, and they have, just all these strictures, because this incredible stereotype that, people are irresponsible, they're lazy, they're not going to work, they're just going to go buy, whatever things.
But I think when we are having, so those stereotypes definitely exist, but I think when those stereotypes come up, I really think we have to get to the root cause. And I think the question is, what are those stereotypes rooted in? And the reality is that stereotypes are rooted in racism, sexism, and classism. And I think it's all of our responsibilities to push back against those narratives, because I think the narratives are harmful for so many reasons. I definitely think it's harmful to mainstream society, because then we end up walking around here with this notion that it's not true of what individuals' lives look like. And so I think that's harmful in that one regard, because it allows us to put policies and systems in place that we're in a lot of instances actually working against our own best interests. So I think that's one harm in a single narrative. But I also think it's harmful for our mothers as well, because if you are constantly hearing in mainstream media what it is that your life is supposed to look like, or what it is that you're capable of, there begins to be a self-fulfilling prophecy that you no longer dream for anything more than what it is that individuals are telling you, because it's not like we're teaching history anymore. So it's not as if you know what you are actually capable of, what is rooted in your DNA, because you're only hearing this, oh, I am supposed to do X, Y, Z, and I can't be trusted. And, all of these very harmful stereotypes. So I think it's our responsibility, those of us who know better, to push back against those narratives. And actually the question, where is that coming from? I've said to people quite often, where is that coming from? And I've actually said to people, who hurt you that you actually believe that? And I think that, we really just have to call out some of these narratives for what they are at face value, especially if we have the agency and we have, hierarchical power and those things where we actually can.
Yeah, Carol.
I'm just going to suggest to Aisha that you talk a little bit about what the thrust. So we never stand still. So we've got the money going out there. So what's the next step? So there are two parts of next steps, and Aisha can talk. One is, how do we impact policy? And she's doing that now at the national level with the child tax credits. But how do we change the narrative? And why don't you talk a little bit, Aisha, about front and center with Ms. Magnolia?
You're doing so great, Carol.
Wait, before you do that, I want to hear that. But first, give us just a taste of some of the impacts that you've seen, right? So now it's been 3 years. So again, I totally agree and appreciate that we have got to push back on these narratives and push back on what people are thinking. And I love the question about how were you hurt, who hurt you, that you have to believe this for your own, for your own being, whatever. But tell us just a taste, and I don't want a whole report, but just a taste of some of the benefits that you've seen with the women who have had a year of having this unrestricted.
Yeah. Definitely. So, we have a full evaluation that we've done for the last 3 years. And every year our evaluation shows that individuals are able to save more money. They are able to, have better access to healthcare, to pay for more nutritious food for themselves and their kids. They're able to get out of debt. They're able to actually go about getting higher levels of employment because they actually can take off work. A lot of the families that we work with have hourly jobs where they don't have paid leave. They're actually able to take off work and do the whole process of looking for better jobs and going on interviews and those things. So we're seeing all of that, which is the consumer sovereignty, the capitalistic aspect of it, what you expect to see. You give people money, they use their agency, they do what it is that they need. And I think that's great. But I think for me, and especially in the last 2 years, the piece that we don't talk about enough that we're seeing joy. We're seeing our moms actually believe in themselves and actually dream for themselves beyond their kids. When we first started this work, every time we would ask one of our moms, well, what is it that you want? Their want was always connected to their kids' wants. They never talked about themselves in isolation of their kids. It's like, oh, I want my kids to go to college, or I want to have a house for my kids, or, I want to make sure my kids have a better life. Now that's changed. Our moms are saying, oh, I would like to own a nail salon, or I want to be a paramedic, or I want to go back to school for myself. So we're seeing their dreams change and recognize that they can have dreams that are not directly connected to their kids' dreams, and they're happy, and that's great. And and that's the part of it. I say all the time, I'm like, I think that's the sexy part of guaranteed income, and to me, that's the exciting part. That's where you get to change, and that's where you get to systems change, and that's where you get to policy change. So that's just a little bit of what we've been up to.
So tell us a little bit about what Carol had asked you about your work with the Ms. Foundation and the storytelling that's happening.
Well, thank you, Carol, for teeing that up. So, when we first started this work with our guaranteed income, it really was a bigger picture than just giving the money. Yes, we wanted to make sure that we had a proof of concept that we can demonstrate that you can actually give extremely low income Black mothers money and that they can be trusted. So that was one piece of it. But we also wanted to make sure that we were leaning into federal policy as it relates to cash disbursements, not just guaranteed income, but as it relates to cash disbursements regarding our social safety net, and really doing the work necessary to reform our social safety net, because the way it's currently laid out is paternalistic, it's punitive, it's not working for families. So we wanted to do that. And then also we wanted to make sure that we were going about changing the narrative about how we talk about poverty and how poverty is viewed within this country. And we've been sort of successful on all three of those. So we continue to, give mothers money with Magnolia Mothers Trust, currently the longest running guaranteed income project in this country, and the longest running since Nixon's triple income tax back in the 60s. So we've been pretty successful in that. As it relates to policy, we really have, since COVID hit specifically, have really been on the front lines of talking about cash without restrictions. So really advocating for the stimulus checks first and foremost, and then really advocating for child tax, for the child tax credit expansion. We're excited about where we are with the child tax credit as far as it being refundable, as far as we'll have it for another year, but we know that there's still work that has to be done as it relates to permanency, because we need permanency. Families have already talked about how these resources have been a lifeline, and to give families a lifeline for 16 months and then say, okay, now you can just go swim, and that is a ridiculous concept. And not only is it a ridiculous concept, what it is that we're already seeing with data as it relates to the child tax credit is that individuals who are middle income or upper middle income that are receiving those resources, they're saving it. So they will be in a much different financial situation, whereas those individuals who are benefiting the most as far as being able to pay their bills and get out of debt, they aren't having that ability because so many things now cost more. So they're seeing the real cost of inflation in real time.
All right. Well, clearly we have a lot of work to do. And clearly you both have been so instrumental in radicalizing notions of what it takes, which actually goes back to very basic things, which is it takes money. And here it is, right? So it seems pretty simple, but it is unfortunately, in this day and age, it's very radical. But your success and your dedication and your love of the people that you work with and the project and our belief in justice is going to propel us forward. So I am just honored beyond belief to have this time to talk with you. I am so grateful for your vision and for your love and your courage and for the work that you do. So thank you for being with us.
How has being a part of the Magnolia Mothers Trust and receiving $1,000, how has that helped?
It was nothing but a blessing, and that I know, and I'm so thankful because it's helping me through my car note. It's helping me be more balanced with paying bills and saving money, and you know what I'm saying, not being frugal but just being smart.
I'm Tamika Calhoun, and I'm originally from Chicago, but I've been here long enough to say I'm from Mississippi, Jackson, Mississippi. I have 5 children. When I first received the first check, I wasn't working then. That's when I had just lost my job. I was able to buy things that my children needed, and then their birthdays had fallen around that time. I was able to get them something that they wanted instead of, just kind of getting them what I felt like they would be happy with. So it was able to provide that for us. I've never been able to, because it's 5 of them. And sometimes they want things that I know I can't afford to give them. So that's what else it provided for me. And I was able to pay my bills. So that was helpful. To have no strings felt like a blessing.
I use it towards the groceries, gas. I did have to get my van fixed. So without that, I would have been without debt for a long while, actually. So I do it, use it towards whatever daily needs I need.
What would it look like if you invested in yourself as much as you invest in Fred?
I would not be living paycheck to paycheck. I don't want much, but I want to be okay. Like, I want a house. I would definitely have a house because I would have invested. I would have gone back to school and, making at least or around, 35, 40, 50, somewhere up in there, depending on the job. I know it's possible.
Being poor sucks. And you know what really stinks is that in this country, the richest country on earth, we have enough resources so that nobody has to be poor, so that nobody has to struggle to figure out if they can eat that day or find a place to live or have shelter or do many of the things that most of us take for granted every day. Yet in Maine, we have many, many people, thousands of people who live in poverty and 70,000 people who live in deep poverty at 50% below the poverty level. And we have 15% almost of our kids living in poverty, and 25% of our kids not knowing they're food insecure. They don't know where their next meal's coming from. We have got to do this better. But we are never going to do better about this until we check ourselves and our own stereotypes, our own single story about what we tell ourselves about people who are poor. For decades, and probably more than decades, we have been fed lines and media stories of saying that poor people don't want to work, that they're lazy, that they're on drugs, that they're not like us, they don't work, all of those things, none of which are true. None of which are true, and they certainly are true for the entire swath of people. So we have to think of different ways to address the issue of poverty, because we know it works, right? Money. Money is what takes care of poverty. And so the program that we did today, when we're talking about guaranteed basic income, is one way. And here is another thing, is I think about our social service programs, thousands of social service programs designed with good intention to try and help people not suffer so much when they are poor. Very few of them are designed to help people with a path actually out of poverty. And therein lies the problem. So I've had this idea for a while of how we could do our social service system differently. So right now, if you need social service, if you need TANF or a service program, first of all, you are covered, you are shamed, you are embarrassed, all that stuff. And you come in as this shamed and embarrassed person, right? And you meet a caseworker. And that caseworker has a book of regulations this big. And they are told to make sure you don't get a single thing more than you deserve. And make sure, so the energy is like this, and you're already at odds. Let's reimagine this. Imagine if we took that same amount of money that's being spent, and the person coming in was going to meet with their coach that was going to help them get a job and get them out of poverty. And they could use that money in whatever way that person needs, because maybe Sue needs childcare. And Joe needs help with his elderly mother who he takes care of. And Fred needs steel-toed boots. And Joan needs reliable transportation. But they don't need all of them. So your caseworker could actually use that money in the ways that you need and set benchmarks to create a path for you out of poverty. Doesn't that make more sense than the bureaucratic laden, rule and regulation laden thing that we have now that's not working and hasn't worked for decades? It might not be a perfect idea, but it's an idea. And we have got to do two things if we are going to address poverty. One is to check ourselves and our own attitudes and stereotypes about people who are low income. And the second thing is we have got to reimagine and try new things and figure out how we get money into the hands of poor people, because that is what's going to change things.